Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Amanda Wilkie. Hi, Amanda. Thank you for being on this episode of the Boomer Briefing Podcast.
Hey, Jon. Good to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Now, Amanda, you spend a lot of your time in the areas of technology, in the areas of process improvement. We had a recent conversation around project management, but I think you find yourself, and I think you would agree with this, spending a lot of time as well helping firms understand their culture and just firm culture in general, because a lot of the problems you're helping firms solve kind of connect back to firm culture. And I know you just wrote an article on this, so I would love for this conversation just to be around firm culture and applications and tools firms can use to support firm culture. So my first kind of softball question to you here to kind of set the table is, how would you define firm culture? What is it?
Yeah. Well, Jon, it's a little bit different for every firm, and it's interesting that we're talking about culture now. I wrote the Boomer Bulletin article, and I was excited that you and I could have this conversation because we're starting to hear questions about culture and building culture in all of our communities, all of the Boomer circles. So we had conversations at the Boomer Technology Circle Summit from a technology standpoint. I think there was a conversation in our managing partner circle as well. And it was interesting to have those conversations, especially in the technology circles, because of course we're focused on technology and how technology can solve that problem. So I was, again, excited just to kind of talk about this topic and how to tie technology into it, because I think firm culture is, historically has been pretty organic. It's the belief system, the behaviors that determine how employees interact with each other, how they interact with management, how they interact with their clients. And again, a lot of times it has been implied and it hasn't been expressed explicitly, and it hasn't been intentional. Developing that culture hasn't been intentional. And I think it's going to become more and more important as we start to figure out this whole hybrid work environment, because your culture is what keeps your employees connected to each other, connected to the firm. And, honestly, Jon, I never wanted to work for a firm because, they had a 75-year history, or, the partners, built the firm from a one-room, office in a building up to X number of employees. I wanted to work for a firm because of the things that they supported, their belief systems, the connections that I could make, the friends that I made there. And that's becoming more and more difficult when we're not all in the same location. So I think firms are starting to really focus on culture, and they're going to have to be more intentional about it, because we are headed into this new world where, we're never going back to the office 100%. We're going to be able to leverage the talent pool from anywhere in the country. So how do we build a culture? How do we keep people connected when we're not all in the same building anymore?
Well, and I love all of that, but you said a phrase that I think really helps distill down a complex topic like culture into maybe a simple question. And that is, around your team or your firm's employees feeling connected with one another. What is helping your employees, your team, feel connected with one another? And I think too often when we talk about culture, we don't spend enough time talking about connection, within that. And so I thought that was a really good point you made. So you touched on a couple times too with this whole topic around culture. And even if, let's say an organization is completely in one office culture is still a challenging topic, and it evolves over time and it changes and it needs to be nurtured and things of that sort. But then you fast forward to today, and as you're mentioning, most organizations today are hybrid or remote, and they're balancing that. So as you work with firms to help them or to advise them on how to best build their culture in a remote or hybrid environment, what are some proven ways you've seen that actually work?
Yeah. So there's a few things, John. One is really defining expectations, because of course people can't live up to expectations that aren't clearly defined. And in the before times, if you will, it was a little easier to, stroll by someone's office, sit down with them in a conference room and chat about what was going on, what were the expectations for their role, and make sure that they understood what tasks they needed to take ownership of. That's not as easy today. So you need to make sure that you are clearly defining those expectations. You also need to make sure that you are building trust. I mean, that is extremely important from a leadership perspective. You have to build that trust, and it's really a two-way street. So, managers need to better manage in that virtual environment, but also allow the employee the space to be self-sufficient, because one of the big things going into a remote work environment that people are concerned about is, well, are people going to be productive? Well, you need to trust that they are going to be productive, and you need to set the expectations, and then you need to give them the space to be self-sufficient in that. And then along those same lines are, setting goals, making sure that they not just understand what's expected of them in their role, but what goals do they have? And this could be, anything from, communication to certification or educational goals. But of course, they need to be smart goals. So they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and then time-based goals as well. So after you have defined your expectations, you let those expectations help build trust, and then you set goals. Then you really want to focus on communication, because the communication is going to build the transparency that, again, supports that trust building. And we see this, many firms do like weekly team meetings, weekly one-on-one meetings, things like that. So, you really want to focus on, again, that communication that's going to build the transparency that's going to, again, feed into that trust aspect.
No, that is great advice. And I know you spend a lot of your time with firms in the area of technology, software, and just managing all that comes with those types of projects and initiatives. So as you think about culture, and then as you think about different types of softwares or tools or applications that can be used to further enhance and help build culture, what applications come to mind for you?
Yeah. Well, John, Boomer Consulting has been completely virtual for a number of years now. I mean, I've been with the company for almost 4 years, and I was onboarded completely, remote. And so we've been video first. We've had a video first culture for many, many years. And I was recently talking to a firm that said, early on in the pandemic, everyone, or no one would turn on their camera. And then we got to the point where everyone turned on their camera. And now that we're some of us are back in the office, some of us are still at home, we're seeing less and less cameras on. You need to be video first the camera needs to be on no matter what. That's going to help you build that connection. It improves communication, and it helps people feel like, they are more connected when they can see each other. So that's the number one technology. If firms right now, if they're not using video, they need to be using video. Also early on, the pandemic back in 2020, we saw like shortages in webcams and things like that. That's not necessarily the case anymore. You may have to wait a while to get some, but if your staff, if they do not have video cameras, then make sure that they get them, because your organization needs to be video first. So that's the first thing. Instant messaging, I would say, is another thing. So whether it's something like Microsoft Teams or Slack, being able to just quickly ping someone for a quick question, that's very good. That way you don't have to wait and see, check someone's calendar, put a 30-minute meeting on their calendar for something that could be a 3-minute, chat. Also, those platforms like Teams and Slack give you the opportunity to create that virtual water cooler environment, if you will. And, remember, we can't go down to the break room and talk to people about their weekend or what's going on in their personal life. So having a water cooler environment in Teams gives them that opportunity. You can throw out questions, you can put pictures out there, you can really have some of those informal conversations that help people feel connected. And John, in one of our conversations at the Boomer Technology Circle Summit, someone actually said, yeah, we tried the water cooler, and our firm management said, hey, we really don't want to encourage people to spend a lot of their time, posting things in that channel on Teams. Let's shut it down. And that broke my heart, John, because again, that's how people are going to feel connected, to each other as individuals and as human beings, not just as a coworker or a colleague. So instant messaging is one. Social media is going to be another one. Here at Boomer, we use Workplace from Facebook. Similarly, you can use Teams for that. We know some firms who have like private Facebook groups and things like that. So social media, again, some place that people can share pictures and just give each other high fives and let each other know what's happening in their personal lives. Project management apps are another good tool to help build that transparency. I can manage my project, I can put all the updates in there, and then John, you don't have to reach out and call me, or we don't have to have a meeting for you to know what's going on in projects. You can actually look in our project management application and see what's happening. So things like Monday.com, we use Asana, Trello is another one. So those types of applications allow you to communicate transparently without doing a lot of the active communication, if you will. So those are some of the applications that I would recommend that's going to help build culture in an organization.
No, those are great, Amanda. And, we've definitely seen an uptick in firms at using those tools. I think the pandemic showed or kind of highlighted for, a lot of firms is firms that were making those proactive investments in those technologies pre-pandemic are frankly ahead now from where firms that are just now picking it up and trying to figure out how to make that work. So, Amanda, I know you're so involved with firms as you kind of help them navigate this. I'm sure you have a few tips as well in terms of what are a few ideas you have that as firms look to strengthen and build their culture in a hybrid environment or a fully remote environment using some of the tools you mentioned. Any key tips you want to highlight for them that if they had in place would increase their chance of being successful?
Yeah. Number one is the intentional communication, John. So weekly one-on-ones, whether that is a manager with an employee, project teams that are meeting. And these don't have to be long meetings. They can be quick 15-minute meetings. That's plenty of time just to do a check-in, to see someone on video, and to get an update on, on the project. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a long meeting where we're going through every single thing that you're doing. So it's not a micromanagement kind of meeting, but weekly one-on-ones, at least weekly. Another is, again, it's all about intentionality. A community, or excuse me, a committee that is focused on culture can help. Here at Boomer, we have a committee, we call it the Culture Club. And I love the Culture Club because, again, being remote for so long, we've really had to focus on our culture. So one of the things that I love that came out of that group, the Culture Club, was our Break Room Buddies initiative. And Jon, I know you have a break room buddy, I have a break room buddy. And what that is every couple of months, we get assigned a random person within the organization to be our break room buddy. And we set up just 20 to 30-minute meetings, once or twice a month. And I think we change these out on quarter. But the only rule of the break room buddy meeting is that you can't talk about work. It is to talk about, personal things, what books are you reading, what sports are you playing, what are your kids up to? And that has allowed us to really stay connected. And one of my favorite stories, again, Jon, this came from the Technology Circle Summit. We have two people in our organization that for their break room buddy meetings, they would go out and they would find pictures of break rooms on the internet. They would make that picture their background on Zoom, and their entire meeting was coming up with the backstory of, if this was our break room, what company would we be working at? What would our role there be? What would the culture be like there? And I absolutely love that example, Jon, because think about the creativity that these two people are building, the collaboration that these two people are building. They're not talking anything about work. They're just having a good time being creative and getting to know each other. And Jon, they enjoyed that so much, their break room buddy assignment, that after that quarter was over, they still continue to meet and do that. And I just absolutely love it. So that's another idea. And I'll leave you with this one, Jon. This is very, very important. And that is always the tone at the top. So if you're doing break room buddies, if you're throwing out a challenge of everyone, at a picture of teams to show what you did over the weekend, how you enjoyed the weekend, then your leadership team needs to be active in that as well. They need to really show that those water cooler conversations, the social events, all of those things are important to them as well.
No, that leadership at the top is really, really excellent and super important to, again, building the culture, right? It starts at the top. And so I think that's sound advice there. So as we conclude this episode, Amanda, what's the one next step someone should take? Maybe they're energized from certain aspects of this conversation and they're thinking, all right, we really have to be more proactive in how we are building our firm culture. What's your one piece of advice to them?
Yeah. Don't do it in a silo. That's very, very important. I recommend, and Jon, I'm sure you'll include a link to that Boomer Bulletin article in the materials for the podcast. They can always reach out. I'm always happy to talk to them about culture. I know that other consultants in our organization are having these same conversations. So we're always happy to share, what's worked for us, and be happy to bounce some ideas off of it, or off of each other. But again, I wouldn't do it in a silo. Reach out to your peer communities, reach out to other professions, reach out to consultants, and help, build that culture club for your firm.
That's excellent. All right, Amanda, you and I could talk about this topic for probably a few more hours if we wanted to. So to keep with our theme of 20 minutes or less, that concludes this episode of the podcast. So Amanda, thank you for being on.
Thank you, Jon.
And for those listening, if you enjoyed these topics, as always, we would love for you to subscribe. We release new episodes every Tuesday morning. We have not missed a Tuesday morning yet, knock on wood. So please subscribe. That really helps us out. And stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks so much.